and welcome to another Mini Sky Tonight. And so, since I've kind of been in quarantine a lot, I know one of the things that I enjoy doing is watching a lot of television, and one of my favorite shows is Star Trek. And I've been enjoying watching the old series, The Next Generation, Voyager, Deep Space Nine, just being able to rewatch them all over again and picking up on some more nuances as I go along. And it got me wondering, how close are we to some of that technology that we see in the shows? Because, I mean, often in our scientific realm, sometimes science fiction spurs on science fact. And it's basically a transition of what could be to now we have it. So I wanted to present to you some of the technology I picked out from some of the different shows, and to show you how some of that, what once upon a time thought was never going to happen, to now, hey, this is maybe a close possibility, or yes, we do have this. So think of this as an inspiration, because somebody thought, hey, why don't we try this? And it came into reality. So for you younger kids, you guys may be the next generation that takes on these weird projects and turns it into reality. So consider this as a fun, inspirational walk into technology, and possibly give you some ideas of, hey, how could we take that next step to make this a reality? So how close are we to some of the Star Trek technology? Because when you look in the shows, they have phasers, they have holograms, they have replicators, they have communicators, they have a ton of technology, which back in the 1960s through the 80s and so on was so far-fetched that many people thought back in the day, oh, this is so far sci-fi, it was never going to happen. But as that generation that was inspired by those shows has come into the workforce, they have created some of the technology that we see. For example, touchscreens. I remember growing up with the Next Generation and just seeing all those fancy touchscreens, and then looking at my old Dell computers and thinking, wow, that would be so cool just to press a button on the screen and just to be able to have things interactive rather than having to type a command. Well, for you younger generations, that is a reality today. Somebody thought of it too. They thought rather than having to type in commands or things of that nature, they thought, why not just click on the screen? And you see it in constant movies and video games where they have this beautiful touchscreen display where they can interact with it and everything. And we have that today thanks to inspirations back in the day. Communicators. I can remember back watching the original series where they flip open a communicator and they're able to talk with somebody at such a far distance away, and has GPS communications and everything of that nature. And as well as, especially for my generation, I grew up with Star Trek: The Next Generation, and just being able to press a button on your shirt and you're able to communicate with anybody on the ship. That to me was profound. And we have that today. To me, when I look at the old communicators from the original series, I thought, wow, that reminds me of my Motorola flip phone. And because the Motorola flip phone allows you to communicate over vast distances, and it allows you to have a GPS locator so that way they know exactly where you are. And it kind of brings a bit of a story, just so not to date myself. I can remember talking to my grandfather from our driveway for the first time when I received a cell phone. My parents and my family got their first mobile phone. It was like this big, huge brick, but we got one. And just as a fun prank to my grandfather for his birthday, we decided to pull up into his driveway and give him a call. And he was talking to us, and then we said, hey, Grandpa, look outside the window. And we waved at him, and he was blown away that the fact that we were talking to him just a few feet away without having any wires whatsoever. So just within a few years, we've gone from wired telephones to now having these communicators that don't require any wires at all. And of course, when I look back now at those communicators from the Next Generation that you could just press a button on your shirt and you're talking with anybody in the ship, that's pretty much Bluetooth. So the concept of Bluetooth had its ideas way back in science fiction, and now it's become a science fact today. And it's hopefully with more and more advanced technology, Bluetooth can even become more capable of doing other things as well. Interactive computers. I can remember watching a scene from one of the old Star Trek movies where Scotty is lifting up a mouse and saying computer, and he can't figure out why it's not interacting because he was so used to being able to talk to a computer and it respond back. And to me, as a young kid, thinking like, wow, it'd be so cool just to say, hey, computer, do this, rather than having to type commands in, because I know I get so frustrated when I would type in a command and it says, nope, command or bad error, sync not found, and I would be like, oh. So just to be able to speak something and the computer understand me would have been great. Well, today we have that. All we have to do is say, hey, Alexa, hey, Google, or hey, Siri, and boom, you have an interactive computer right there. Because somebody saw that and thought, hey, that would be a cool idea, and brought that science fiction into reality. So these are some of the few things that I saw that, hey, we have that today, that many people back when the show was brand new thought, oh, this is never going to happen. Well, guess what? Now we have it today. So now we're getting into the stuff that's kind of close on the brink of creating it, but not quite. So this is something for you guys to pay attention to, for you future engineers and scientists, to possibly be inspired to bring it to the next step to reality. Replicators. One of the cool things I always enjoy watching Star Trek The Next Generation is basically Jean-Luc Picard going up to the replicator saying, Earl Grey tea hot. And there was a beautiful steaming cup of hot tea ready for him to enjoy. And or like there was one episode I remember watching where this one alien came up to the replicator, was so mind blown that he ordered almost everything that could be possible on the ship and was enjoying every type of food. So the concept of being able to have any type of food, anything that you wish, just produced right then and there for you would be phenomenal. So how close are we towards it? We're kind of close. The first step towards it was what is known as rapid prototyping, or the early stages of 3D printing, where basically you can make any type of object using a material and it creates it into a layer. So rather than just basically creating a flat image per se, it was be able to create a 3D model. And the rapid prototyping, as you can see with the image in the center, was some of the first results. So where we can get basically a replication of any type of model that we would put into the program. And it was really great. And we even have 3D models today that we could even take to our home. But rapid prototyping, like the big, huge honky computers that they had in major engineering, was what we had. And it was able to replicate any type of model that you could put into the system. In fact, it was just recently in 2019 that the University of California at Berkeley created a 3D printer using light and this kind of goo material. So that was the first step to go from just basically like your basic 3D printer, taking a material, heating it up, and then just layering it, to it uses light to create the layers. So we're almost on the brink. In fact, the image on the bottom right shows basically what they created as a three-dimensional model using that light printer. It was basically the jawbone of somebody's teeth. And that was really good because they thought, wow, this could be really great for having to model teeth and everything. So we're on the brink of it. So that's the next step. And of course, there's even food replicators. So the image on the left, the TNO, is basically you take these different types of food and you can make it into 3D different models. And of course, on the image on the right, use your basic 3D model that you can even purchase for your own home should you wish. So the fact that these old prototypes, of going back into an image, these old prototypes that only major corporations could be able to have, that we now can have it sitting in our own living room, and we can have food replicators basically in terms of taking food and creating three-dimensional models of food, it's not too far a step away. So you future engineers and scientists, you need to take it to the next level. We are on the brink, so it's not too far. One of the fun things I always enjoyed, and I can't tell you how much I would have wished to have these, especially to help me prevent having to go for a doctor's visit, was a medical tricorder. Just to be able to have something that's about the size of a cell phone and just to scan myself. It's like, oh, I'm suffering from this. Okay, so I need to go see a doctor. Oh, I'm just suffering some symptoms of a cold. Okay, I'll just go grab some medicine off the shelf and just trough through it. Just to be able to scan myself and say, oh, these are my medical conditions. Now, that's some of the science fiction, but we are on the brink of creating science fact. Allow me to present to you what is known as Scanadu. It is the first medical tricorder, basically. Basically allows you to scan it over your heads, and it measures your heartbeat, your temperature, your blood pressure, and everything just by scanning over on top of your head, without having to prick your finger, without having to put a little knob on the tip of your finger, without having to do the blood pressure cuff, because I know I hate that blood pressure cuff. So just to have this device that you just simply scan over your forehead and it basically does all these readings is one step closer to actually having a medical tricorder. Now, it hasn't gotten approval by the FDA, but it's on the brink. So, project for you guys. And when you think, I was like, well, I can't do anything, I'm in quarantine. Guess what? Newton created calculus while he was in quarantine from the Black Plague. So I think you guys can do something awesome. The next step, transporters. I can't count to you the number of times when I was running late to something and thinking to myself, man, I wish I could just transport myself from point A to point B just to get there, just to say, beam me up, Scotty, and I'm there. I'm pretty sure all of you that have ever been in a traffic jam have thought that at one point in time. So how is it possible to use a transporter? So the way the transporter works in the Star Trek realm, in case you don't understand some of the science behind it, is basically what it does is it deconstructs the matter on one side and reconstructs it on the other. So that literally means it basically tears your body apart and then reconstructs it on the other side. Now, there's some implications as to whether or not the person on one side is the same as the other, and they kind of go into that philosophical debate. And in fact, there was one particular doctor who never wanted to go into a transporter whatsoever because of that implication. So are we close to having transporter technology? Well, the first attempt to make a quote-unquote transporter was done by a group from IBM, and they took a single beam of light and transported it from one side of their IBM campus and transported it to the other side by deconstructing it and reconstructing it on the side. But there's the concept of, okay, so if you're deconstructing and reconstructing something on the side, the one person on the side, one side would literally die and then be remade on the other. Kind of sketchy. So that's where the philosophical debate comes in. So maybe transporter technology is not that great, but I know for the convenience sake of getting from point A to point B, I know some people are willing to accept that risk. But take it what you will. I will. In fact, if you want to leave debates down in the comments below, you're more than welcome to. In fact, one step further, it was in 2015 that the University of Copenhagen figured out how to create this quantum entanglement where there's connection between particles, because one of the fears of the IBM group was that, yeah, you can deconstruct it on one side, but how do you reconstruct it back to a similar condition on the other side? Because they were just using photons or single particles of light. Now, when you're talking like a carbon-based life form, like say, for example, an apple, there's a lot of different protein chains and things like that that you have to deconstruct and reconstruct back in the same state. At the University of Copenhagen, they figured out if you use quantum entanglement and have this quantum entanglement in a steady state, you basically can create one particle and its quantum counterpart be on the other side in this entanglement, so to say, and they know exactly what's going on with the other. So as you deconstruct one, the other one can be instructed to basically take its place. That's the loose end of it. I did read the paper on it, and boy howdy does it get a lot deep into quantum field theory. So just for the sake of this video, that's the basics of it. If you would like to read some of the papers, you are more than welcome to. Okay, next step, holodecks. This is always one of the things I always wanted to enjoy, is just to be able to go into a room and experience a fantasy. Basically, one of the shows I always did enjoy was when Data and Geordi were able to go into the holodeck and basically relive Sherlock Holmes, and or to go into a holodeck. As one of the fun things I saw Data do is basically play poker with a bunch of famous scientists and engineers of the day and just have fun. It was just the concept of being able to step out of the real world into this fantasy world always blew my mind, and I always wanted to be able to do it. Well, believe it or not, we are kind of close to that. We have invented virtual reality, or VR, where you can put on this headset and you can live into the world of whatever game or virtual reality is being displayed. So we're kind of close to it. We haven't been able to create a holographic floor per se, but we have been able to create a holographic world. Now the dilemma is with that is having to do with motion sickness, is where you perceive emotion but your body is not experiencing it, so you kind of get a little bit of motion sick. So that's one of the steps we have to be cautious of. Whereas if you're on a holodeck, you can be with the motion and feel with the motion, so that is a little bit tricky. So that's one of the hurdles that we're hoping to be able to overcome in the next few years. And of course, we now have holograms, where there's the infamous hologram of Tupac during his dedication concert. Plus you have in Japan, where they have this hologram of this Japanese singer being presented to a bunch of fans worldwide. So it is possible to create some type of holographic image per se, but you have to do it through a different medium. You just simply can't have like the Star Wars thing where you have this little puck and then all of a sudden an image displays and help me Obi-Wan Kenobi, so to say. We haven't gotten that far yet. So that's the next step, is to create a three-dimensional step. And believe it or not, some scientists have tried to do it. Dr. Stephen Benton in 2003 was a part of the spatial imaging group, and he created what are these called hologram sugar cubes. And these hologram sugar cubes, they were these three-dimensional models that when you push on them, they would deconstruct. So it was the first step of creating a three-dimensional model, but it wasn't kind of like what we had in the holodeck, where you can create something that you can interact with and be able to engage with. So we're on the forward motion towards being able to create holodecks. Next step, phasers. Okay, now we're kind of getting into some military grade stuff. So you had the phasers where you could set them to stun or to kill, and you could basically point them at an enemy and just shoot a beam of light and knock somebody out. Well, this is where we started to get into the US military. They have worked on these energy beam weapons. So in fact, they created a phaser that was just very minute and microscopic, that could shoot light energy at a person that makes it feel like their skin's on fire. And the pain went in as soon as you basically moved it out of that beam of light. But keep in mind, this was a steady beam of light, not just like a simple blast per se. So, and it also took a ton of energy. Basically, they had to have several generators to be able to produce this phaser shot. So it took some time. But however, some of the new phasers that they are working with are used to be taking out drones. In fact, there's an image right down below of this phaser, to where it basically sends like some kind of phaser, like an EM pulse, towards the drone, and it basically causes their circuits to fry. So we got phasers starting to come to the cusp, but in my personal opinion, I kind of hope we don't have to go down that military grade, but we are. Next, androids. One of the fun characters I always enjoyed was Data from the Next Generation series, and how he brought the concept of AI and how a robot can become a sentient being and become a functional person in the society, even though they aren't physical blood and bone. And so just to have this unique character presented as a philosophical debate was unique. So how close are we to having an android like Data? Well, we have created some types of androids and engagement robots that are now more capable than your basic robots like what we use in like industries and stuff. We have Robonaut, which you have a person take like these game controlled gloves, as I sometimes like to call them, and basically interact with the robo, so that way the astronauts could take the Robonaut outside and not harm themselves in the vacuum of space, and the robot can still do these fine motor skill tests as needed, and yet all the astronauts are safely inside the International Space Station. In fact, the next step that they're hoping to do as we go to Mars is called Valkyrie. It's this wonderful, amazing robot that basically can detect a person's life signs at a distance, and if they're in danger, Valkyrie will go to that person, rescue them, and then take them back to home base. And it has several capabilities and everything that is basically kind of like a medical droid, as they were. So we're getting close. And then, of course, you have other companies that are creating these amazing androids as well. Over here on the top left corner is an android called Spot. Was the first one to be able to have kind of unique mobility to where it can bend its knees, it can climb upstairs, it can even do a backflip, which was kind of crazy. You have Asimo, which was a unique type of greeting robot in Japan, which allowed, basically it would read your visuals cues and understand your vocal things, and it could do a lot of different things when you're interacting with it. And then of course you have Erica, which was the first Japanese robot to become a news reporter, basically. And then you have Sophia, which she was the first representative for AI robots. And they were programmed to be able to interact with people, read their vocal cues, as well as read their facial signs to indicate what kind of mood they were in. So we are kind of on the cusp of being able to have androids. Now, to have AI to go from a simple basic program to actual cognitive thought is a very complicated process. And in fact, if you want to see some of the videos of Sophia and Erica, it's really unique and kind of a bit of an uncanny valley, as it would say, but it's really unique to look at the new perspective of how far we've come in terms of robotics. Next, tractor beams. I always thought it was so cool, but yet so scary whenever a ship would send out a tractor beam and cause this one ship to literally become in a dead halt, like if they threw out a net of light and captured an object and dragged it into them. And I thought, how could it be possible that you could send practically a light beam and pull something into the ship? Well, believe it or not, other people have thought of this. In 2013, the Czech Republic and UK did a collaboration where they took light particles and moved objects on the microscopic level using just nothing but light, and basically pulled on these particles using nothing but light. And then of course in 2015, the University of Bristol created a sound tractor beam where they basically could take these molecule beads and move them around using nothing but sound, which was really unique. But we're talking about like something on the order of a tiny little pearl being moved versus a huge ship. So we're kind of on the right track, but it still takes a lot of science and energy as well. And last but not least, warp drive. To be able to travel through the stars with the newest technology of being able to go to the stars now without having to use the old shuttle missions and being able to use like the SLS and things like that. Now that we can have this new technology, let's look further and talk about possible warp drives. What it would take to be able to go to all the stars rather than having to depend upon thruster or ion cannons and things of that nature. Well, in terms of being able to travel faster than speed of light, kind of hard, but it may be possible to bend space, meaning kind of create like a fold, so to say, and basically allow space to fold around you to be able to travel through space. In fact, the White-Jude warp field interferometer basically was able to create these pockets warp, so to say, to allow one particle to go from one side to the other in such a quick fashion that it allowed the area to be warped in such a way it could travel between 2 points relatively easily. But again, microscopic level, not the whole huge decks of the ship. So, and they've also realized that you have to kind of redesign the ship in order to be able to create this warping factor. So you can't have the traditional Star Trek ship in order to be able to go on the warp. You have to have this unique kind of structure where it's like this football-shaped thing in the center plus a ring around it. So it takes a little bit more to be able to do it, but there are scientists that are working on it very closely to be able to do it. So here's what I've got so far. If there's any other things that I missed that you say, hey, this person thought about this, and they also don't forget about this, leave it down in the comments below. I would love to be able to do some more research on it. If there's any other topics you would love for me to cover over, leave it down in the comments as well. Also, for parents, if you're looking for something for your kids to be able to do over the summer so that way they can still stay engaged while being in quarantine, futurereadysa.org presents like these fun activities that you can do from your own home, and you can earn electronic badges. I'll leave a link in the description below should you be interested in being able to take on the astronomy one, which I personally was involved in. And until next time, stay safe, stay healthy, and as always, never stop learning.